Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm very excited to talk about Portugal and why Portugal should be a very good option for you, maybe in 2026 or moving into 2027. So let's go ahead and get started. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about, of course, why Portugal. Why Portugal could be a good place for you. We're going to cover the different visas because obviously you will need a legal visa to move here, what those requirements are for the visas. And then we're going to really touch on more than just the visa because when you move, it goes beyond the visa. Of course, you need that, but there's more around moving than just the visa. It's a lifestyle change. So, what does that look like and how can that be a comfortable move for you? And then, of course, how I can help with Slate and Key. So if you don't know me, my name is Kaylee. This is Slate Key. I have been living abroad for 16, almost 17 years now, and I've lived in 5 different countries. The pictures here, you have my husband, and now we've added to our family. We do have a daughter, so we are a family of 3, and we live in Porto, Portugal, and we have been here for over 5 years now. It's actually the longest place that we've lived compared to some of these others in the pictures, and then traveling as well. We love to travel. We've been living abroad for a while, and so it's nice to base ourselves in different parts of the world, be able to travel. And we were closing in on 100 countries that we've traveled to. So it's something that we really enjoy, that we started our different companies to help people do this. And this is ultimately why I did start Slate and Key, is to help you achieve the same things that we did. So, moving on, let's talk about, of course, the first thing is why Portugal. Why Portugal should even be a consideration. Why I think it's a great place to live for many, many reasons. And of course, I can't touch on all of them tonight, but I'm going to touch on a few top ones, I think. And then, of course, we can talk maybe in the Q&A at the end. So there will be a short Q&A at the end, depending on how time is. And then Josh, my husband, is in the chat function right now. So you should have a chat function if you had any questions or anything, I guess, that you wanted asked right away, or you could put it in the Q&A part for afterwards. So if you see Josh in here, then he is there in the chat function if you need help with anything. But we will get to your questions at the end. So why Portugal? Have you recently desired or thought about any of these things? Have you thought, oh, I just wish I had a better work-life balance. I work a lot. There's no balance here. I'm not enjoying life. Have you thought about safety? Maybe where you live, that's a concern for you. You don't feel safe, or you don't feel safe for your family, maybe your kids or your grandkids. So safety is a consideration. How about a comfortable climate? Is it just gloomy all the time right now? And you're like, I wish I could see more sunshine. Or, I really like to ski and get into the snow, and I just live in a place where I can't get that. So are you looking for a different type of climate? How about affordability? I think this covers all of us. The overall cost of living. Where can I cut my costs and where can I just achieve a better lifestyle because I can move my funds into certain areas that work for me to where I'm living a comfortable life, but it is a successful life and maybe an efficient type lifestyle that you're looking for. So affordability, and then maybe the adventure or just overall travel. Maybe you've thought, I've been living in my country for so long and it's just kind of stale, a little bored. I'm looking for something more. So I'd like the adventure of something different, or travel. If you come to Portugal, obviously you live in Europe. You are part of the Schengen if you have a residency visa. So you have free EU travel that you can go in and out. So maybe you've always thought, I love Europe. I want to travel. I want to see so many different countries and cities. And so if you move to Portugal, then this is achievable because you're no longer looking at really long flights. They're long, they're expensive. You don't have the time off. You can pop over to different countries very easily, and it's very normal to do that on a quick flight or a bus or a train, or even just renting a car, or if you own a car, driving into different countries. So maybe you want to travel and you want to see a little more of the world and you want to experience other cultures. So have you thought about any of these recently? So my big question for you, and I really want you to take this in and think about this. What's stopping you from moving? Why haven't you moved? If you've thought about those things or you do have other reasons, why haven't you moved yet? So seriously, if you're watching this webinar on your own, maybe you can think about it, or you can jot down a few notes, or if you're with someone that you're watching, you can talk about, like, why haven't we moved? What is really holding us back? So this is a really good exercise for you to figure out your why you potentially want to move, and kind of the driving force. And then why haven't you? Why are you not moving then if you really do have this why and this desire to move? So we don't have loads of time right now for me to just sit here and let you go through that, but I would recommend that you do look into this. Maybe I'm a big like pros and cons list maker, and I like to make lists and think things through and write things down. So I think it's a good exercise. Either think about it yourself, or if you're thinking about moving with a spouse, a partner, a family, to talk about this, to take notes as to, like, you want to move and you do have a desire to move potentially to Portugal, but what's stopping you from moving? But then you have to think about you have the roadblocks and you have like what's stopping you, but what are the solutions here? How can you get past those roadblocks? Maybe some of the roadblocks are things like you have elderly parents and you're afraid to leave them if you're an only child and you're the only one there to help take care. Or even if you have siblings, you're just afraid to not be spending as much time with them. Or maybe it's your kids or your grandkids. It could be financial. You just think, oh, I don't know if I have the money to actually make the move, that big setup cost that a move does entail. I just don't have the money. Could I sustain it if you are a freelancer? Worrying about the money rolling in. So, I mean, there's obviously always going to be lots of different roadblocks. So, what are some of the solutions? So, again, you can make that list. I have these roadblocks. I have these things as to, why I want to move, but what are the solutions to that? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, how I can help. And again, how Portugal is a great place to move and how you can actually alleviate some of the stress that you have probably in your home country now and how you can have a very fruitful life. So I'm here to tell you that you can do this. And again, this is one of the reasons why my husband and I do what we do, because we have talked to so many people about you can do this and this is how you can do that. So let's talk about, though, is Portugal right for you? I'm going to talk about the great things about Portugal, and then you can decide on your own if Portugal is a place that you would actually want to move to. And then you have to think about your timing. This is really important as well. Your specific timeline, it's very personal to you, what that looks like. And then, of course, the documentation and working backwards from your intended arrival date. So we're going to talk about these too. So I'll touch on the perks of Portugal. Of course, we have to talk about what the best visa is for you because that will be different for everyone. A realistic timeline on what that looks like. Because if you're like, okay, I'm ready to go. I want to move to Portugal next week and I'm coming in on, let's say, a D8 visa, that won't work. You can't do that. That's not a realistic timeline. So you do have to plan out a realistic timeline, which is very good because then you have an idea and you have action items and tasks to get you going, get you moving, and get you excited. Because like I was saying before, we want to go beyond the visa. We don't want to just talk about the move and only talk about the visa. There's a lot of companies out there who are going to help you with your visa, but that's not what a whole move is about. There's so much more that goes into it. And so you want to be prepared for that emotionally, mentally, physically. There's a lot of things that you want to be doing that go beyond the visa that make it an exciting time, because it is an exciting time. It is something that you should be excited about. So we want to make sure that you're ready. And of course, that goes down to implementation. So giving you the keys that you need, the right tools so that you can implement properly. So we're going to go through all that today. And then, like I said, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So a few things I'm just going to compare today. Earlier, I said that there are a lot that we can talk about, but I'm just going to talk about these main four today, some of the comparisons. So we're going to talk about safety, affordability, weather, and food. And then I'll probably throw in some other, good things as well along the way. So getting to safety, just so you know, in the Global Peace Index, GPI, Portugal is ranked at number 7 worldwide. So globally, Portugal is ranked at number 7 for one of the safest countries in the world. So let that sink in. It is a very, very safe country. Iceland is number 1, just to give you an idea. Obviously, very different living. It's an island. It's a lot colder for sure, but Iceland is number 1 as far as safety. I did want to highlight that 8 out of the top 10 are European countries. So what's good about that is when you do live in Portugal, a very safe country, then you can travel to other pretty safe countries as well. So you do have that working out for you. A lot of people, when you think about Portugal, you also are comparing Spain as an option because of the Iberian Peninsula. There's a lot that is very similar. So just to give you an idea, Spain is 25 on the Global Peace Index. And then UK, also a great place, English speaking, which is very easy. Harder, it's not part of the Schengen because of Brexit, but you do have that as a potential option, a little harder with visas, but it is 30 on the GPI. And then, of course, unfortunately, the US is fairly low at 128. Now let's move on to affordability. When we're thinking about Portugal and its affordability, I put that it's middle to low in the EU, meaning that the most expensive country in the EU is Switzerland. Okay, so then we see different, varying countries, and Portugal is right in the middle to the lower part of the EU countries. To give you an idea, Romania and Bulgaria are some of the lowest as far as cost of living. Overall cost of living is quite low there. They did just recently fully join the EU, though. So we'll probably see prices go up a little bit. Bulgaria has already adopted the euro. Romania has not yet, but they are a bit more recent and new to the EU. So they still have some of the lowest overall costs of living. But of course, very different lifestyle, different sizes of cities, different weather that we're going to find in those two countries because they are a lot further east in Europe. Albania and Montenegro are often talked about as well because they are very affordable, which is very true. They are very affordable. The problem is they are not part of the EU. They are not in the Schengen. So while you do have more affordable, I would say, than Portugal, it is a little more like the Wild West, a little maybe unkept. And so that could be stressful because you maybe a moving target in a sense. But then also, you do not have Schengen free travel. So when you do live in Portugal, you are able to travel around the Schengen freely. You don't have to worry about your typical 90 days that Americans have. Albania and Montenegro will not allow you to have that. So then going back to just some overall costs to compare US and Portugal, of course, this is very variable. It will depend on what state you're in, even what city you're in that state. It depends on your lifestyle, how many you are in a family. But just in average, for US monthly expenses is around $6,500 to $7,000. And then for a family of three, and the reason I put a family of three is because this is actually my personal experience. While I did look up averages as well, everyone's a little different with the lifestyle that they're going to have, where the location that they're going to live. So I wanted to give you a real life number that we, for a family of three, spend around $3,500 to $4,000 a month. And this is including rent. Our daughter goes to a private Portuguese preschool. So there's those expenses. Of course, if you are just a couple, then you can take a little bit away, but it will a lot, depend on where you are located in Portugal. Lisbon being the capital, Porto, the second city, in Braga. And we're going to break that down in a second. But then also your overall lifestyle. So when breaking down some of the costs, housing is definitely the highest, and it has been high here. I'm sure if you've done any research in Portugal, you've seen that housing has skyrocketed, which is true. There has been a bit of a supply demand issue going on. So a massive demand and just not a good supply. Supply, but maybe in ruins, right? Something that you weren't going to move into, not move in ready. So we did have an issue there. So we saw prices go really high, and prices are still high in Lisbon and even in some parts of Porto, but we're seeing that it is stabilizing a little bit. And it will be your highest, cost, of course. But then also thinking about, if you live in a massive house in the US, are you willing to downsize a little bit? Are you willing to go to an apartment that has less rooms? Because then you can keep your costs lower when it comes to your actual housing. But thinking about, how much do you pay if you have a mortgage in the US? How much is that mortgage? Or if you're renting, how much is that rent? And how is that comparable to life here? And what city you're going to live here in Portugal? And then when we're thinking about groceries, you have everything from the big stores to big markets to small little markets. They still have fruit shops and the butcher and so on. So you can definitely keep costs down if you do more local and if you do things that are seasonal. So an example of the seasonal is make berries, for example. If you love raspberries, then if you eat them mainly when they're in season, then they're very, very affordable. But if you're going to be eating them a lot more when they're out of season, then you'll see that there is quite a price variance. But if you're willing to do seasonal foods and trying new things, then that is super helpful. But groceries, you can definitely keep your grocery bill down. Again, a lot will depend on where you shop and what you're getting. If you're getting a lot of food that is imported, then you're going to see costs go up. But one other thing I do like about the groceries here too is that eating in the EU, at least, like, it's known to be, maybe using less pesticides on certain things, or maybe healthier. So overall, groceries, while they are, I think, a little more affordable and some things are subsidized in Portugal, then also a little healthier as well. Then, of course, you have to take into account eating and drinking out. If you eat local, the Portuguese food is still good and very strong here. You can still find good prices for menu of the day, for example, and a lot will depend, but what city you're in, of course, as well. But, maybe from 7 to 15 euro, 15 on the higher end in certain Lisbon areas, areas around Lisbon, but anywhere from 7 to 15 for a menu of the day, which will include like a starter, like a super salad, and then a main dish and probably a dessert. Maybe your drinks included. Maybe there's a coffee. It could be all of those. It could be maybe 3 of those. So still really good deals when you think about local food. And then, of course, ethnic food is around. It's easy to find ethnic foods, again, depending on what city you're in, but those prices will, of course, be higher. So just thinking about your eating and drinking out budget. But what is it like in the States? If you're in the US, how much is it for a family, a couple or a family of 4, maybe, to go out and have a meal at a restaurant? When I speak with people, it sounds like it can be very expensive. Whereas here, I think you're going to find that it's a lot more affordable. So you'll see your overall eating out bill and just food in general go down. Then when you think about costs of transportation, you don't need to have a car here. You can do public transportation. You might want a car. So if you do want a car, overall, it's going to be cheaper for car insurance and things like that, but maybe a little more expensive for gas. But if you just get rid of the car altogether, then you don't have a car payment. You don't have to pay for gas. You don't have to pay for parking. You don't have to pay for insurance. So here you're seeing that just go all the way down. No car. It goes all the way down, and you're just using public transportation. And the public transportation here in Portugal is very good. So in Lisbon and Porto, there are metros, and in Coimbra, they've just recently opened up their tram and they're adding new stops. So we're seeing that that is very efficient. Also, every city has buses that you can take. To give you an idea, in Porto, for us to be in all zones to take the metro and the bus in the whole area, it is 40 euros a month for unlimited travel on buses and the metro. So you have a set amount that you would be paying. And kids under 23 are free. So that's really nice as well. If you come with kids, then they all get their pass. They still tap, but it is free for quite a long time, 23. And then, of course, public transportation, if you want to travel around Portugal, then you have buses, the train. You can always rent a car and drive into Spain as well, but rent and drive around Portugal. So if transportation is a big one for you and you're okay not owning your own car or at least attempting that at first, then you can see that that cost will go way down. And then healthcare, that is a huge one for a lot of Americans. They're paying so much in private health insurance, and you can choose to have private health insurance here, but you don't even have to have that if you don't want. So you could really, really reduce those costs. The public is tax funded, so you will obviously pay taxes, and that goes to the public health care. So either it's free or very, very cheap when you go. Um, we'll just stick to the affordability of it because there are perks to the public and private, and I recommend both, honestly. But you could just use the public if you want to, only public, or you could primarily use the public and then top up with health insurance in the private sector to have access to private clinics and hospitals as well, but it is a lot more affordable on a monthly basis. And this will vary too, depending on your age, your health, pre-existing conditions, and so on, but still a lot more affordable. So I know that's a big pain point for a lot of Americans is healthcare, especially if you're younger, but you want to quote unquote retire early, but you can't because of healthcare and having to have that because you have to have that in the US. So if that's something you're thinking, then potentially Portugal could really, really cut your costs down. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the weather. I'm sure you've seen that Portugal has 300 plus days of sunshine, maybe a little more or less depending on where you are in the country. But if you're looking for heat, the warmth, you've got Algarve, very warm weather there, which is really nice. If you wanted something like that, if you're going for a little more mild, then you've got the Lisbon region. You options there by the river or by the coast, and then a little more temperate. So the north, depending on where you are in the north, you might catch a little more rain, but it'll be cooler. So if you're trying to escape the heat, then you do have the north. And then if you're looking for snow, there's a mountain here. If you want to go skiing, they do, or snowboarding, then they have that as well. So you have the mountain. If you like to surf, obviously there's a lot of surf because a large amount of the coast is on the Atlantic. It is cold water though, so you will need a wetsuit. Just keep that in mind. But the Silver Coast is an area that has great surf among other places. So honestly, for such a small country, there is a lot to offer when it comes to weather. And so you could find that ideal weather spot in the country, which is kind of crazy because it is a small country, but there is a lot of variety there. Okay, food I think is a fun one, and I think it needs to be talked about because I don't think it's really talked about that much. But if you go to Food Atlas, their 100 best cuisines 2025, 2026 has Portugal at number 4. And I just wonder if you have ever had Portuguese food or know any of the Portuguese food, but it's pretty crazy that it's number 4. And this is voted on by actual people. So it's not just some snobby gurus of food that are just saying, oh, we should do Portuguese food, but it's actual people who are eating Portuguese food and are ranking it very, very highly. So who beat out Portugal? I think these are worthy of noting: Italy, Greece, and Peru. So that Peru might actually surprise you. But Italy and Greece are obviously given. I think we know about those cuisines, but you might not know much about Portuguese food. And so what's really nice about that is you would have a lot to explore culinarily when you are here. So what do they have? Of course, they have meat. I had to put it in francesinha. If you don't know what a francesinha is, it is famous in the north. It's one of my favorites. It is a sandwich, but you don't eat it with your hands. And it's covered in cheese and a beer sauce, and it has a lot of meat in there. And not all francesinhas are the same. So you have to get a good one to make sure you really like it. But it's very meat heavy. It's a good one. If you don't know what it is, you'll have to look it up after the webinar. But then you also have options of pork and beef, chicken, of course, too. But pork is pretty big here. And depending on what region you're into will depend on what they specialize in. So some have, like the Alentejo, for example, has very, very good pork. Of course, there's a lot of seafood as well. So if you like seafood, then this is going to be a great place for you. Cod is one of the biggest. There's a joke that they've got over 1,000 recipes for cod. So you do have that. Sardines are also big, and we get to see those come out at a lot of the festivals, which is fun. Then you've got shrimp, prawns, sometimes they call them here, octopus, any other sort of shellfish. And so all sorts of really, really good seafood that you see in a variety cooked ways. Like you can have seafood rice, you can have it by itself, mixed in with something on its own. So many options. And of course, there are other fish as well, not just cod, but cod is the biggest one by far. But if you do not eat meat or seafood, you're a vegetarian or a vegan, yes, you still have plenty of options. Now, Portuguese food has been known for quite a while to, I think, be meat heavy or not very vegetarian and vegan friendly. We're seeing a little bit of a shift there just with how things are. And you go to a Portuguese restaurant and we're seeing that there are some more plant-based options. And they do have it in the Portuguese cuisine. You might just not have as many. But as far as other restaurants that are popping up all over in the cities that are becoming more vegetarian and vegan friendly. So you will not go hungry if you come here or whatever your flavor is. Now, if you do want to buy ethnic food, just keep that in mind. You can get that. It might be hard to find certain things. There are different shops like, a Chinese shop or a Mexican shop or, where you can find these different cuisines, but it might be more expensive and a little harder to find. So if you can embrace what's here, then you're going to, I think, enjoy a variety, maybe some new stuff, and then probably a little cheaper as well if you stick to Portuguese food. But overall, pretty crazy that Portugal is number 4 for the best cuisines in the world. Okay, so we've talked about why Portugal is so amazing, but you have to have a visa to get here. So what are some of those visas? They do have a variety, entrepreneur, student, and so on. But some of the top 3 are the D7, the D8, and the Golden Visa, which I'm going to break down for you right now. You do need to figure out what visa is best for you. You've got to think about how you make your money. That's one of the biggest, the different stay requirement that you will have depending on which visa. And then some of the other requirements are fairly similar when it comes to what exactly you need. But the big ones are how you make your money, how much money you make, and then your stay requirement. The D7 is the passive income visa. It's not just for retirees. I think for the longest time it was dubbed as the retiree visa. So it would confuse a lot of people. You don't actually have to be retired to have this visa. You just have to have your income coming in passively. So that's through a 401k, a pension, if you have rental properties, the rent but that's coming in. So it's just in a passive capacity. And the good thing about the D7 is you can apply if you have, let's say you have rental properties and you're getting it from that, you can still have a job. So you would just apply. You can't apply with passive and active income, but you would just apply for passive, but you still are allowed to work if you have a remote job. It doesn't come with a work permit, so you can't come here and then find a job, but you could still keep your online business, or if you're freelance or you work for a company, you could still do that. As opposed to someplace like Spain, their comparable visa is the non-lucrative, and you are no longer allowed to work on that. So that is literally not for retirees, but like you're not making any money. So here, what's really great is you can apply with passive income, but you can still have your job if you have an online job. It is pegged to minimum wage, and that has been changing. It's been going up slowly every year. It's currently 920 euros a month. So that means you need to be making at least 920 euros a month. Keeping in mind it's euros, so do the exchange if you're coming from the US. So you have to at least be making that proof of that per month. And that is for the main applicant. If you have a spouse and or dependents with children, then the spouse is 50% of minimum wage and the dependent are 30% each. So then you add all that up and that's how much you need to be making per month. You must apply from your home country. You can't come to Portugal and apply for the D7. The D8 is the active income. So it's very, very similar to the D7 as far as how you apply the requirements that you need. But this lends itself to active income. So if you are a remote worker, a digital nomad, a freelancer, so if your company allows you to work anywhere, and you need to check with your HR and make sure that anywhere does allow you to work outside of the US if you're coming from the US. But if your company allows you to work from anywhere, then you'd be in the D8. You would just show proof that you have a contract with them. If you own your own business and you have contracts, then you would show proof of that. So you need to have obviously proof that you are making money because they're looking for financial stability. So it's in an active capacity or a salary. Now this is pegged to 4 times the amount of minimum wage. So that's currently 920 times 4. And then if you are coming with a spouse and or dependents, it is the same, the 50% and the 30% for dependents, each dependent that's a minor, but only that amount of minimum wage. So it's not 4 times 920, that amount, and then 50% of that. It's just 50% of 920 and then 30% of 920. So the big chunk is for the main applicant, 920 times 4, and then it drops down a lot more for every dependent that you add on. Also, for this one, you must apply from your home country. Then we have the golden visa. I'm not going to go too much into this one. I'm, mainly focusing on the D7, D8, but this is a really good visa if you can't move now. So if you're looking to move in the future, because it doesn't have any stay requirements, and the D7, D8 do have stay requirements because they're residency visas and they're meant for you to live here, which means you have to live in Portugal and you will be paying taxes. If you can't move right now and you don't want to pay taxes in Portugal, at least at this moment, because of your work situation or some other situation, then you could be working towards permanent residency and citizenship, which that hasn't changed yet. It is still 5 years in Portugal, but you could be working towards that without actually having to be here longer than it's either 7 days or 14 days, depending on what year you get it. But it's good for 5 years. And then at 5 years, you can pull the money out. So it's not just like you poof, the money's gone. And the norm is 500,000. That is what the government is requiring for the most common visas. There are donations that you can do, and that is poof gone, that are less. But the norm is 500. However, we work with a company that is able to, they have different ways of front loading interest so that you don't have to necessarily have 500 in cash on you. They have different ways of it being less and also going through IRAs and stuff. So there are different ways of doing it. So you might think, oh, I don't have 500,000 sitting around in my bank account. You don't have to. If you're thinking about the golden visa, then you can reach out to me and we can talk about what that looks like, and I can put you in touch with someone who can explain it further. But there are ways, if you can't move now, or if you don't want to pay taxes, the golden visa might be best for you. All right, so how do I apply? Like I said, all of them actually you have to apply in your home country. You cannot come to Portugal and apply. It has to be at your home country. And it's either going to be through VFS Global, which is a third party organization that helps many countries process visas, or your nearest consulate. And depending on what state is your jurisdiction, will depend on what either VFS you have to go to or your nearest consulate. So you don't get to choose. You can't just say, I'm going to go over here because I know this one exists. Where your state is will peg you to where you have to go. And then you have obviously a whole slew of requirements that we're going to go through as far as what you need for the visas. So, what are some of the scariest requirements? I think probably the biggest one is the 1 year lease. You do have to have a housing lease as part of the D7 and the D8. I'm going to focus on those two visas right now because they're the popular ones and they're the residence ones, which means you want to live here. But you do have to have a 1 year lease. If you own a property, then that works as well. So if you want to buy, and I'll speak about that in a little bit, then that works as well. But if not, then you're going to have at least, it has to be at least a 1 year lease showing that you have a place to move to when you come here. You also have to do your FBI background check. So you go get your fingerprints done, you have the FBI issue that, and then you have to get it apostilled to elevate that it is legitimate. You have to fund your Portuguese bank account. So you have to get a NIF number, which is your tax ID number. And with that, then you can open your Portuguese bank account. And at that point, you have to fund it, which means it depends on which visa you're coming in on and how many there are of you. But if it's just one person, let's say coming in on the D7, then that means 920 euros at least per month that you have to prove. You have to put a year's worth of that in a Portuguese bank account. And that happens before you have your visa appointment. So you have to fund the Portuguese bank account, which means you have to change your USD over to euro. You want to make sure you get a good exchange. If you can time it when the exchange is good, and that you're not getting hit with any fees. So that's another thing. If you go directly from your US bank into your Portuguese bank, you're probably going to get hit with some really nasty fees. So there are workarounds to this to make sure that you send as much money as possible and it makes it over when you do the exchange. You also are required to have health insurance. Health insurance you have to have it through your IMA appointment, which is the in-person appointment that you have here, which finalizes your residency. So you have to have it through there. It is going to be more of a robust type insurance that you probably aren't going to keep. You won't need it because it's going to be international and it's going to include repatriation, which you don't need to have once you actually live here. That's when you can drop down to a more affordable private health insurance. But you do have to have health insurance as part of the visa. And then you have to get an appointment, whether that's an appointment with VFS or that is an appointment with the consulate, depending on where you live. Oh, but that's not all. There's more. Of course, there's more. You have to notarize things. You have to apostille things. So various documents. If you're coming by yourself, it's one thing. If you're coming with a family, if you have kids, then you have to have birth certificates and marriage license and so on to prove that you are allowed to move them internationally. So, of course, you have that. You have to have proof of finances, where the money is coming from, where it's going into, showing that you have stability of finances. And then I think the easiest one, passport photos. So you just go to CVS or Walgreens and get your passport photos. This is not an exhaustive list either. There are other things, but these are some of the main things. And then when you arrive, of course, thinking about, do you know about healthcare? Do you know about your tax obligations? And honestly, you should know about your tax obligations before you move. That's something that you should look into on the US side and the Portuguese side, because everyone's a little different. And when we talk about the Portuguese side, a lot of people get really scared with that 48%, but it is on a progressive scale. So it is important to talk to a tax professional that can look at your portfolio and give you a better indication of what your percentage is and a ballpark number of how much that is. Because also, too, you will have things that look a little different in Portugal compared to the US. So one of those, a really big one, is capital gains. If you're going to sell your home before you go, you want to time it to where you're not paying capital gains in Portugal, because they will take a cut if you become a tax resident. So timing this is really important. But then also knowing on the US side of things, you are a US citizen, so you have to still file taxes. It doesn't mean you have to pay, but you have to file. Even though you're not a resident, even though you're not living in the US, you still have to. And that's federally. So you want to work with an accountant who understands what it's like for you to be an expat. But then you also have to think about statewide. Even though you don't live in the state, some states follow you. California, I'm looking at you. If you live in California and you're thinking about full on moving to Portugal, then there are some things that I would recommend you do to cut ties with California so that you don't get taxed. And it will depend on your situation, if you still own a property there or what that looks like. But you want to cut ties. Some states are better than others. So you want to move to and domicile in a different state to lower your tax obligations in the state. And then something like a driver's license exchange. If you're going to get a Portuguese driver's license, then you have to do the exchange, which that means before you leave the US, you need to get your driving record and you need to get it state apostilled. So not federally, because it's something that's issued by the state. So then the state does it. So that will be like a different apostille compared to your FBI background check, for example. So these are all some things that you do beforehand, but then when you arrive, you can start processing them. Healthcare, you can talk to someone to understand the public and private. You can get to see your GP, set up a GP, so bring your health records. You can get a specialist if you need, and so on. Taxes, you'll know what you're working with. You can meet with tax professionals, and then you can do the driver's license exchange, which is through IMT here. It's like the DMV in Portugal. Okay, don't feel overwhelmed. I know that I talk a million miles an hour and I'm saying a lot of things, but I know your time is precious and I want to get through it in a timely manner, but it is a lot. There are a lot of things. And like I was saying before, it's not just about the visa. There are a lot of things you have to do for the visa, but remember, you're excited to move. You're moving to a different country. It's an adventure. It's a new journey for you. So you don't want to be so bogged down and so overwhelmed thinking about the visa. You want to enjoy the process and be excited about the new place you're going to live in, excuse me. So why do people leave? Because this does happen, and I'm sure you've seen reports of, if people are leaving Portugal in droves, which is not the truth. But why do people leave? A lot has to do with unrealistic expectations. They weren't properly prepared, and they just started off on the wrong foot. So what I mean by those is they, again, maybe focus too much on the visa, and the visa really destroyed them in a sense that it's bureaucracy and it doesn't seem efficient. The Portuguese stay in their little box when they are thinking of things. Maybe they were denied and didn't know they could appeal, like different things that they could do. So maybe so focused on the visa that they forgot all the other aspects that they needed to make sure that they were either closing down in their home country or setting up in their new country. And so they just started off on the wrong foot. They weren't properly prepared or coming in with unrealistic expectations. I mean, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, right? No place is perfect. So you can't think that it's going to be so amazing. If you're leaving problems behind, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be problems in your new place. So just knowing it's going to be different is going to help you. And going in with no expectations, honestly, and just enjoying the ride is going to make it a lot more fun for you. Then, of course, implementing the right strategy. And this is something that I'll speak about with Slate Key, and why I started Slate Key is to make sure that you implement the right strategy as you go through the process, so that it's just an enjoyable time. It's not stressful. It's fun. It's exciting. And you're going through the steps in the time that you need to, the way that you need to. And so it's just not stress-free, or it's stress-free. It's just not stressing you out. So one thing that you do need to think of is setting up a timeline. And this is going to be personal to you, when you want to move, for example, and then probably working backwards from there. So if you have a target date in mind of when you want to move to Portugal, then you need to start thinking about all the different things that need to be done beforehand. Again, some visa related, which some things are time sensitive, and others are not visa related, but there are things that you need to do. Again, I mentioned, are you selling your home? So what does that look like? You have to get it ready. Are you selling all the things in your home? Are you doing an estate sale? I'll talk about shipping in a little bit as well. So like thinking about all of those things that you need to be doing beforehand as well. And then things on the Portugal side that need to be getting set up that are visa related but are not visa related. So you really need to be realistic in your time frame. Um, this will take time. So it's actually nice if you have a longer runway. So if you're thinking about, oh, I'm not leaving and I don't want to leave until the end of 2026, now is actually the time to get going. Or I don't want to leave until 2027, quarter one, quarter two, now is still a time to get going because of the things you can be doing. And again, we want to make sure it's not stressful. So just having a realistic timeline is important. But again, it is very personal to you. Now, being in Portugal obviously helps if you're able to do scouting trips. Those are great, but those are only just little nuggets, of course, because when you travel somewhere, it's very different to when you actually live in a place. But if you're able to, you know, come and scout, it helps. But then here, there's a lot that goes on by word of mouth connections, and of course, you want to be working with trustworthy resources. So that's why having someone boots on the ground is really important because it also goes beyond what you can research online. Sometimes there's misinformation online as well, but there's only so much you can find online. So, for example, if you're looking for housing, everyone uses the website Idealista, and that's great. But there's still so much that's not even put on Idealista, whether that's for renting or buying. So much still word of mouth, and you want to go with trustworthy people to make sure that you're getting yourself in a good situation if you're going to rent. So this is where I can come and I can help, and I'll get to that in a minute. Like I was saying before, timelines will vary. So consider your intended arrival date, getting your documents together, getting that appointment right now is a really big pain point. But having people working in your corner so that you're not having to like all hours of the day trying to log on and find an appointment, having people helping you with that, and just what needs to be done before you move. There are things that need to be done. For example, just to understand the healthcare system. You want to understand how the healthcare system works here, but then you also probably want to go see your doctor again, do a final check, and get your health records. Something as simple as that, that maybe you haven't thought, oh, I should do that. But then it's just going to prepare you better for when you're over here because when you go see your GP, they're going to ask you these questions when you had last tests run. And you could say, oh, here's my proof, or they might say, well, let's go ahead and run them, even though you just recently did them. So stuff like that you need to do before you move, that's really important. Again, on both sides, in the US and in Portugal. So this is what comes down to Slate Key. What if I helped you with all of this? What if someone is there guiding you, assisting you, showing you the way, giving you the perfect timing of when you need to do something to not overwhelm you? So while we see all of these things need to be done, of course they do, but every place has its time. So I can help along the way. So what does Slate Key do? There's an immigration assistant. That's me. And I'll talk about that in a second. We have a lawyer with full visa assistance. So the legal team, anything that is visa related is covered, which is housing, of course, because that is part of the D7 and D8 requirements. But it goes beyond just finding housing. It is housing that you actually want to live in. So that is also important. Making sure that you get a lease that doesn't have any sneaky clauses in it, but housing that you actually want to live in. And then intro calls for healthcare, tax, and finances. So I'll get to that in a second. So immigration assistant support, that's me. And I did have someone one time ask, well, what makes you different than any other relocation company? Because there are a lot of relocation companies around. And I thought about it for a second, I said, well, me. And I didn't mean that in an arrogant way, but I did mean, for one, I've been doing this for a long time and I'm well versed in Portugal and I know how Portugal works. But more than that, more than just the boots on the ground and the knowledge that I have, is that you will be talking to me. I think when you work with a relocation company and even sometimes with different law firms and visa companies, legal teams, you get passed around. Like they won't even sign their name on the email because it's like 5 people have access to that email address. So you never actually know who you're talking to. And then you wonder if they actually know anything about you, or are you going to have to explain yourself over and over? Or did they forget that one little detail that you told one of the people? Did it get put in your file? Are you talking to a chat bot? Because that is something that happens a lot too. With AI and how things are being automated, sometimes you're not even talking to a real person. So what do I offer? What does Slate Key offer? Me. We have a WhatsApp messaging, a group if there's more of you, and I am helping you the whole way. You know who you're talking to. And even if you have any like sort of silly questions, big or small, you can always write me about those. So I think that helps as well because you have someone who has the knowledge. So when you're like getting worried or thinking, oh, should I be doing this? Or what about this? I didn't even think about this or anything like that. Then you have someone that you can actually talk to who lives here and is a real person. The lawyer. You obviously need a lawyer who is fluent in English, who is trustworthy, because unfortunately, I have heard too many stories of lawyers who have taken that first payment. Oh, they do payment installments. And you pay the first maybe 50%, and then they disappear. And then you obviously don't get your visa because the legal team is who does your visa. And you need someone to quick to respond. This is not a very Portuguese thing, quick to respond. So you might just not hear from anyone. And then you're like, should I write them? I don't want to be a bother. But then you don't even know if anything's actually moving along. So the legal team that I work with is going to be all three of these and so much more, because I am also there moving things along, asking them what's going on. We need to touch base, set it up. So you have someone in your corner who's pushing things along in a nice way, though. Okay. I mentioned housing before. This is a really scary one for a lot of people because it is a requirement. So you might not be able to come here, and maybe you've never even visited here, which this happens. So you have no idea what you're working with. That's why I'm here. Whether it's renting or buying, I recommend renting first. But if you did want to buy, I can assist with a mortgage broker, with a good realtor, and so on. But if you're just renting, which I think is better because you get here, you figure it out for yourself, you find out if you like the city that you landed in, if you like the neighborhood in that city, and so on. But you want to have someone who listens to what you're actually looking for, because far too many times you'll say, I want this, and then someone will show you something else because it's just part of their listing, and they're trying to offload it because they work for the landlord. You don't want that. You need a good, reliable person who is listening to your desires and what you want, and then someone who actually checks the property. So that's what we do as well. Going in, checking the sights, the sounds, the smells, because you can only see so much through pictures. And of course, they're not going to be taking pictures of mold on the wall and say, oh, look, there's mold in this place. But when you have a trusted person who can go into the apartment or house and look for those things. Are there smells? Is there a restaurant nearby? And you open the window. Oh, what a beautiful balcony I have. But then all you do is smell food, or there's a barking dog or something. You need someone who's actually able to go and look at these so that you do have the soft landing that you're looking for, and that the apartment that you think you have or the house is actually what it is. So, of course, full assistance because it is part of the visa anyway, but then making sure it's right for you. And then, of course, included in our services in Slate Key, you'll have a healthcare call. It's important to understand the public versus private. They can help with the insurance side of the visa. If you have any pre-existing conditions, if you need to see a specialist, making sure where those specialists are located and if they speak English. And then maybe you take prescriptions for something, knowing, of course, they'll have it over here, but it might come under a different name. So just knowing what it's called over here. So that way, when you get here, you know what's going on, and you can kind of hit the ground running, of course. The tax call, like I mentioned before, it's very important to understand your Portuguese taxes and what your implications might be. If there's anything you can be doing before you move, that'll be easier, minimize your tax burden for when you're over here. So working with a Portuguese accountant and a U.S. accountant, and then a financial planning call. So you might have a financial planner, which is great. I would highly recommend you ask them if they have any other international clients, so that you can make sure that they understand that you will be moving internationally. So just kind of floating that as something, asking if they do, but financially just making sure that you have that set up. And maybe since you're moving to Europe, you might want to diversify your portfolio and move into some sort of investments in Europe, which clients do that as well. So just understanding your financial planning moving forward, this just helps with not being so worried about the financing side of things once you move to Portugal. And then what about when you arrive? Of course, an airport pickup. You might have a long journey. You might have a lot of bags. So you don't want to have to think about how to get to your accommodation. So we're going to make that a soft landing. We're going to have someone there with a sign so that you get picked up and then you're taken to your accommodation. And then after you arrive, I joke, we're still here. We're not just dropping you just because you've arrived and you're in Portugal. We are still here because the important part is that you have to have an in-person appointment with IMA once you're here. So while you do apply in your home country for the visa and you get the approval there, once you come here, you have one more appointment that you have to have that's in person. They check your documents again, and then they take your biometrics. So they take your picture and your fingerprints, and that's when you get issued your residency card and you become a temporary resident. So we're going to see you through all of that. We're going to make sure that you get that appointment, that you go to that appointment, and that you have a good, successful appointment, and that you get that card. Then there's other aspects to think about. Flights. Are you flying commercially or not? Where you're flying from. Can we minimize the amount of stops that you have, and so on? Price, of course. Pets. Are you moving with pets? You do need to do stuff with the USDA within 10 days of your departure. And so that's very time sensitive. There are certain things you could be doing before that to make sure that your pet is up to date on things. But then it's a small window for bringing your pet over and having the right documentation and then informing them over here that you're coming. But then flying with pets, every airline is different. Size wise, can the pet go in the cabin or cargo? Do you maybe not want to fly commercially and you want to do one of the chartered pet planes that are now available? So there's options there, and I'm there to help you with those. And then shipping. Would you like to ship something? Are we thinking a pallet? Are we thinking a whole shipping container? Does it make sense for you to ship your car? Talking to someone about that, price comparing about that is something that I get asked a lot as well. Or maybe you just want to do a bunch of bags on the airplane. So working through that and what's best for you with what you have, that I'm here for all of that. There's also the things, what you don't know. And I think this is any place that you move. Like even if you're a seasoned traveler or you've moved to different places, there's always those not gotcha things, but just things that you weren't prepared for. So again, that's why I'm here, because for one, you can ask, in Portugal, is it normal for this to happen? And then I can explain. Or I might say, hey, just a heads up, expect this, or just know that this is going to happen. So that way you don't have any of those gotcha moments, that you feel fully prepared, because knowledge is power. So if you have that, then you're going to feel empowered about the move altogether. Um, Now you might say, okay, well, I don't know if I totally see the value in this. Is it worth it, or should I just go with just someone who helps me with the visa, and I'll figure out the rest on my own? I just want to give a shout out to two of my current clients. One just recently said you're worth gold, and I thought that was so sweet of her to say. And I thought, well, that's my color scheme, so I'm putting that in the webinar. You're worth gold. But another one who has been very sweet and said that if anyone needs to talk to someone who is your current client, that she's willing to do that, because she said we often say, and this is a couple, we often say, how do people do this without help? We would be lost. People believe it's a simple process, and we thought so too, until we started it and see all the things you offer. The psychological benefits alone have been worth it. And so she's very sweet and is willing to talk to anyone who might wonder like if it is worth it. But trust me, there's so much that goes into it. And even the psychological aspect of just making it a nice, exciting move is important. For being on this webinar, I put that you will get my D7, D8 visa guide. So that will be emailed to you. So you can kind of see what is required for those visas. But remember, the D7 is the passive and the D8 is the active. So you can see which one of those two is best for you. And now what's next? Let's go ahead and move into a Q&A. So if you didn't pop any questions that you want answered in the Q&A, there's that Q&A box. So I'm just going to kind of go through these quickly. Jess says, how many visas did you cover prior to the D7 visa? Oh, I missed it. Oh, hi, Jess. No worries. The three that I mainly focus on were the D7, the D8, and the Golden visa. I did mention that there are other visas, so it will depend on where your money's coming from. And then, for example, if you want to be a student, then you have to have enrollment to a university. So there are other visas, but the main ones that a lot of people come in on are the D7, D8, and Golden. And the D7 was the first one that I started breaking down and covering. So good question. Also, Jess said, could you go over the healthcare again? If someone's not applying for residency, do they still have access to the public and or private insurance? Okay, so a little bit about the healthcare. As a resident here, you do have access to the public, so you would get your public healthcare number. If you just come here like on vacation, maybe you're doing like the 90 days on, 90 days off, and it's just like your normal tourist visa as an American, you can still access the public, but you will pay. Now, paying for that is not like going into a hospital in the US where you go in with no insurance and it just could sink you. So you do have access to the public healthcare, even if you're not a resident here. And they will actually, in emergency situations, they will take you to the public healthcare, the public hospitals, because the private are more set up for the specialists and the scheduled surgeries. Public does those as well, but they're more equipped for emergencies. So if you're coming in and you're not a resident, you do have access to either. You'll just pay. You could pay for public or private. Private would be more. But if you are a resident here, then you will have access to the public, and you can choose. You can go into the private if you want. You would just pay out of pocket, or you could have private health insurance, which will then you pay a copay. So for example, with our private health insurance, I went inside a dermatologist a couple weeks ago, and it was $17.50 for me to go and see. And that was in the private sector. So with the health insurance, with residency, with both non-residents and residency, you have for both, you have access to both, but it will depend on where you are. And then for the health insurance for the actual visa, that's going to be the more robust insurance because it has to cover repatriation. So and for those of you who don't know what repatriation is, it is if you were to, while going through the visa process, pass away, then Portugal is saying that it's not our obligation to bury you or have a funeral or what do we do with your body. So your health insurance then pays for your body to go back to your home country because at that point, when you haven't had your IMA appointment yet, you're not actually a resident. Your IMA appointment finalizes your residency, but that's why you have to have that insurance through the IMA appointment because it covers you just in case something happens. And then once you have the IMA appointment and you get your card, you are a resident here, and that's when you have access to that. So I hope that that's helpful in a quick rundown. If not, you could always email me and I can explain more. But that's kind of a little bit of that. All right, then Heidi, for the D8 is the monthly income requirement based on revenue or profit. Revenue, actually, yeah. So that's another thing. And even for the D7, same thing. So if you have, I get asked this a lot. So if you have, for example, the D7 rental properties, they just want to see the rent coming in. They're not going to offset it if you have mortgages on there. They're just going to see the contracts and the rent coming in. So the same thing with the D8. What you do is you have to structure it very specifically. So when they look at the statements and the documentation, it looks the way that they want it to look. So this is also something that you need to keep in mind, which is why it's good to have a really good lawyer when it comes to this. But it is on the revenue, it's not on the profit. So even if you, while you will do your tax returns as part of showing your documentation, which is fine. So if you expense a lot and the company runs at a loss, let's say, and you're doing that for tax reasons, the fact that you are paying yourself, if you're paying yourself a certain salary, which you do need to be doing that. So what it is with the D8 is your company, even if you own it, you need to make sure that you're paying yourself. So on a monthly basis, you are getting a salary that will suffice for the 920 times 4. So it's just on the revenue, but there are ways that you need to structure it because again, like I was saying, the Portuguese, especially when it comes to this type of visa stuff, are very like in the box has to look a certain way. And so you want to just make sure that you've got it looking the right way so that you don't risk being denied. And the good thing is if you are denied, there are appeal processes. So our legal team will work with that. But generally, it's you're denied not because you don't have the finances, it's because they couldn't figure it out when they looked at your paperwork. So that's why we do it on the front end so that you're not denied. All right, Jess, how much time does your proof of finances have to cover? It needs to be at least 3 months before your first visa appointment. And the visa appointment is what's in your home country at either VFS or the consulate, depending on where you're located. So you need at least 3 months. 6 months is better, but at least 3 months leading up to that actual appointment. Jess also asked, do you need a year's worth of income in the bank for all visas? For the D7 and the D8, yes, you do. This is a requirement for both of those visas. So you need to times that by 12. Now with the D8, that's a huge chunk of money, especially if you're like, for example, a family of 4. So you don't have to exactly have that amount. There are other amounts that you could do. But yes, you do have to have a year's worth in your Portuguese bank. So that has to be moved over into your Portuguese bank account before you apply for your visa. They will ask for those bank statements. Jess also asked, how are women treated in Portugal in comparison with the USA? I don't know about comparing with the USA. I've been away for quite a while, and I think every maybe state and city is a little different. I think for the longest time, Portugal has been kind of patriarchal, but you don't really feel that when you're out. I think it's kind of just a thing that people say that men feel that way. I don't know, but as far as just walking around, it's a very safe place. So as a woman, like I can walk around at night and feel very safe. It was better a couple of years ago, I would say. There's been some with a boost of immigration. It's changed a little bit, so I am more, aware of my surroundings. But as far as how women are treated, I do have a friend who is a single woman and she's a business owner, and she has talked about how like when she's ordered stuff, like it kind of feels like it arrives. Like she is a chef, so big like things go in the kitchen. And when it arrives, like she'll kind of feels like they're looking around, like looking for the guy. And she's like, it's me, I'm the business owner, like bring it here. And so, who knows if that is because she's a woman, she's also Black, I'm not sure. But she has said that she feels a little bit of that. I've never felt anything like that. Overall, I felt very safe and I felt like women are treated with respect. And I've never felt like it's poor. So I would say it's good in Portugal. I don't know. I couldn't compare it to the US. I'm not sure, but overall, I think women are well respected here. Jess also asking, would it be realistic to go on a $20 visa for a few months, then come back to the US to get another visa? Okay. I don't, yeah, okay. Josh is calling from the other thing that he has already answered that. Because I'm not quite sure what you mean anyway from a $20 visa. But that would be maybe a visa run. If you did want to not do an actual visa beforehand, then as American citizens, we have the 90-day off, 90-day on. So you are allowed to be in the Schengen, not just Portugal, but in the Schengen for 90 days. But then you have to leave for 90 days because that's 90 days in a 180-day period. It's not like you could leave for a day and then come back. You can't do visa runs like that. Just sorry to ask so many questions. That's fine. I'm just going in order anyway. Anyone else can pop them in. We got a few more minutes. Sorry to ask so many questions. Are there any health conditions that would not be accepted into the country? Not necessarily with health insurance. If you do have a pre-existing condition, then there are certain health insurances that won't insure you for your visa. So it will narrow it down, and it might be one of the more expensive ones that will insure you. For example, MGen is one that's pretty good that will insure with pre-existing conditions. But as far as not being accepted, no. But this is something if you do have, when working with Slate Key, you will speak with a healthcare professional who will be honest with you about this, who will let you know where the best specialists are that know what they're talking about, that speak English, so that maybe you want to base yourself close to there. So you want to talk with a healthcare professional about this before you do come. But as far as them saying, no, you can't come in, it won't happen. But if you have cancer, for example, then it might be hard to get initial health insurance. And you do have to have health insurance as a visa requirement. So just keeping that in mind. Heidi, how many months of consistent income at 4 times the minimum do you need to prove for the DA visa application? Good question. So the good thing is since this is for like remote workers and freelancers, this is on average. So if you do have, because a lot of us don't have the same amount of salary that goes in because it fluctuates depending on what you do. So leading up to your visa appointment, you need to have at least 3 months on average of the amount that you need. So if you're by yourself and it's 920 times 4, so you have to have that on average. So if you have like a really good month and it exceeds it, great. And then if you're a little bit below that in another month, that's fine as well. So as long as on average three months leading up to your visa appointment, then you'll be fine. Heidi also said, do you have experience moving pit bulls? Pit bulls are really hard. I know some people who have moved them, but it is a lot more difficult. And so that would be a conversation that we need to have. And I would need to speak with some people as well about what that looks like, because oftentimes with flights, you might not be able to take them. And then depending on what the health certificate says, they might not be let into the country. So there are some things that could be done, but it's a little tricky to answer. I would need a little more information, but a full bred pit bull, and if that's what the health certificate says, then you might have a hard time with that. So just keep that in mind. Laura has said, is there a backlog on requesting a visa due to the folks wanting to leave the U.S.? There's been a backlog for years. So it's not so much an influx of Americans wanting to leave. I think that is a thing as well. But many years ago, the organization that processed visas was called CEF. And there was this planned shift to go to now IMA. And it did not go very well. It was actually very disastrous when the switchover happened, even though they knew it was going to happen. But CEF was already having issues. And then when they had the switchover, this backlog just got worse and worse and worse. And we see lots and lots of issues. So there is a backlog, and it kind of ebbs and flows. Currently, there's a backlog. I'm seeing glimmers of hope, though, with some of the ways that things are getting better, and some things are getting a little more automated, or you're getting more information. Like you're getting an email that says, we've received your visa and it's going to be processed, estimated time, and it gives you a time range. That stuff never used to happen. So the good thing is there is a backlog, yes, but it does seem to be getting better. And it's not necessarily because people want to leave the U.S. It's just high demand. So they are unlocking less appointments. So that does happen. But having someone in your corner to be able to be checking for the appointments is so helpful so that you don't have to. So that's something that we do tirelessly as well to make sure that you don't have to. Okay. Ingrid said, would you provide a timeline on Golden Visa and obtaining residency? Expanding a little bit more since you focused more on the D78. Yeah, of course. So with the Golden Visa, the nice thing about the Golden Visa is you don't have to be a resident here. So that's a big perk for a lot of people. They're not ready to move, but again, they want to start working towards the 5 years, which gets you permanent residency here, and then currently citizenship. So if they do end up changing that law from 5 years to 10 years, then at least you do have permanent residency, and you can choose to take that or not. So you don't necessarily have to live here then. So with the Golden Visa, you would start the process from the U.S., and then you do have a couple of requirements where you have to, depending on the year, it's either like 2 weeks out of the year you have to come here, or 1 week out of the year you have to come here to suffice for that's your stay requirement. So it's pretty much just like a vacation. So you could process and would process everything from the US. You don't even have to come here unless you want to come for certain things, but you don't have to. I do need to note that it is by investment. So they no longer have the golden visa by property. That was done away a couple of years ago. So you can't buy property and have that go towards golden visa. So it's funds. So it's through investment. You have also the option of doing donations, which is less. It's 250,000, but that is like donation. It is gone. So a lot of people tend to not do that. The other one is 500,000 and it is in a fund. So this is also very important. If you're going to work with someone on the golden visa, you need to make sure they know what actually works, because there are only specific funds that are allowed for the golden visa. So you don't want to go with someone who messes it up, and then 5 years later you find out that you were wrong. So what happens is you put it into a fund and you do get interest. It's small, so I wouldn't really look at it as an investment in that sense. It's kind of a perk to it. But after 5 years, you get that money back. Like, that's not like the money's just gone. You do get that money back when you do apply for permanent residency and or citizenship. So the perk to that is you're not paying taxes. Since you aren't a resident here, you don't have to pay taxes. You just come in, just make sure you don't come in longer than your 183 days so that you're not a tax resident here. So you're not paying taxes. You come and go a lot freely, like a lot more freely. You can travel around Europe as well. And yeah, you don't pay taxes and you don't have the stay requirement. So that's a little bit, the timeline is similar in the sense of just of the documentation that you have to get. The timeline is normally a little longer because it's a lot of money. So what happens is you generally talk to the person about it, and then they run through the steps for you. And then you probably want to talk to your financial advisor. You want to figure out how you're going to move the money. Then you give your passport picture them. They start the process and the documentation. So that stuff is kind of as fast as you want it to go. But that might take a month or so as you're kind of working through the process, but taking your time, seeing if it's something you want to do. So that's a little bit of the timeline. But for more specifics on that as well, I can get you talking to someone who can really break it down for you if you want. Okay, let's see. Justin asked for the D8, much savings, probably how much savings we need if we have 6 in our family. Whew, that's a lot. Okay, so like I was saying before, for the D8, although it's 12 months of what that equation would be, I'd have to do the math. So I can't do that off the top of my head, but it would be 920 times 4 for the main applicant. So Justin, probably you. And then the spouse was 50% of minimum wage. And then for the 4 kids, it's 30% each. So that's what you need to be making per month. And then technically you're supposed to times that by 12, and that's what you're supposed to put in your Portuguese bank account. But that is a huge chunk of money, and they don't fully expect that. So generally we'll take that number and we can talk to the lawyer on what they would recommend, but probably a little lower than that. But it is going to be a huge chunk of cash. Now, that being said, the good thing is although it's a huge chunk of cash, it's not like that just disappears. That's your money. It's in your Portuguese bank account. You can start using it for rent. When you move here, you use it for groceries. So it's already funded, and all that money is in there ready to be used, and you can start using it. So it's not just like that money sits there and you have no access to it. You can start using it. You just have to put a huge chunk up front for the visa, because they want to make sure that you can financially sustain yourself for a year, is why they have you do that. But that is with a family that's big, that is a little harder, but it doesn't have to be exactly that equation. We can work the numbers a little bit. Jess, about how much time might a D8 visa take realistically on average? Okay, the biggest thing that's the hardest right now is getting that VFS appointment or consulate appointment. So that's going to depend on where you are, on which ones are better than the others right now. And if you could do a consulate, it's even like normally those are faster right now. So that's a little bit of a variable. But if you're moving really fast, for example, you get the FBI background check, you have to get apostille. That's probably going to take you at least a month. And then the other documentation, depending on how quick you are on finding housing and so on, you could probably be ready to apply if you do stuff quickly. And that's going to be a little bit on you, like how fast you get stuff to the lawyer and get stuff done. You could probably go to the VFS appointment, if it is VFS, or the visa appointment, after 2 months or so. If you can also get the appointment. So let's say 2 to 3 months, and then it's taking them about 2 or 3 months, closer to 3 months right now, on giving you the approval. So then at that point, you get approved, you get the stamp put in your passport, and then you can come here. And then it might take a couple months to get your IMA appointment, but you're already living here. So on average, I think it's realistic. Like if we're in March, I think you could be here by the end of summer if you go now. But that's why I'm saying, like, that's why I said earlier, like if you're thinking 2026, even in the fall or winter, now is the time to start. And even in 2027, quarter 1, quarter 2, If you're thinking that's where when you want to come, then you need to start now. Okay, I'm almost done. Ram, can an immigration lawyer help expedite my visa request? I read about some people filing cases. Okay, so this is important. And a lawyer cannot get you any faster into that initial visa appointment, like for VFS or the consulate in your home country. And if a lawyer claims they can do that, that is not true. They have no pool, they have nothing with IMA on that side, on the consulates and who process the visas. So be wary if someone says I can get it to you, like get that to you really quickly. Okay, that's on the front end. If you are having issues, there is a time frame that you have to wait, but after that time frame, then you can sue, which has happened with people. And when you sue, the lawyer sues, you tend to go up to the top of the queue because then it's time sensitive for them to actually get back to you. So that would be the only way you could expedite, but that's still after several months of waiting because you do have to wait a certain amount of time before you're allowed to sue. So on the front end, if they say I can get you in really quickly and I can get that approval really fast, don't believe that. If there's something that drags on and there's an issue, then you can sue. And our legal team will work on that. Or if you are denied for some reason, our legal team will make sure that you get the proper approval. So then they will appeal it. So it depends on which one you're talking about. If they say up front they can get it, I'd be wary. Heidi asks, how much do Slate Key services cost? Good question, Heidi. This is why, and I'll close out with this in a minute, but everyone is a little different. Everyone has different, while I do include this, it's an all-inclusive white glove service. I do understand that some people maybe don't want certain things or don't need certain things, or if you've already started the process somewhere else and then you want to move over. So everyone is a little different and prices will vary depending on how many people you have in your family as well. So the next step will be for us to jump on a call and talk about that. And I'm going to hurry up. I'm going to go through a few more and then I'll close that out with how to get in touch with me. Georgia says, once you help with a D78 visa, you also help with resources on citizenship by descent. Yes, I can. I need to find out where you are in that process and what that looks like. But yes, and if you want to move, then yes, I can help with that as well. Laura, is there a good domicile for your permanent address before you leave? I know WorldPost is there, but are there other companies that provide this? Yep, they do. And that's something we would talk about. There's some states that are better than others when it comes to taxes. And so it depends on what state you're moving from and which one you're going to. So if that is included in my services as well, working with you on that. And then Jenny, last one, I would like to come in a student visa for a year and then transition to a work entrepreneur visa. Are you able to help with that? Yeah, we can talk about that. That would be something I need to know a little more information about so we can jump on a call. But yeah, although I did focus on this webinar more on the D7, the D8, and the Golden Visa, there are other visas as well, so we can talk about that. Okay, so I think I got through all the questions. Sorry, I was speaking very quickly, but I want to wrap it up because it has been an hour. So my final thoughts are, if you're ready to move, like I said, if you're ready to move this year, definitely, but even Q1, Q2 of next year, then it's time to get going and it's time to jump on a call. So those would be our next steps. We'll jump on a call. You should have already filled out a form that sent your email to me, but if you haven't, then you need to fill out that form, which you can find on my website, slateandkey.com, or you can email me at kaylee@slateandkey.com to ask questions about what's next or to get the form as well. I am going to do a first come, first serve in the sense that I'm only going to take 2, maybe 3 new applicants right now. And the reason for that is because I want to keep this very small and bespoke. And because I said that I am your assistant and guide the whole way through, I need to be available and I want to be available to you. So it's not fair if I'm overwhelmed and I have too many clients working at the same time. So that's the reason why it ebbs and flows on when I take in clients. And now is a good time for intake, but it's only going to be about 2 or 3. So if you are serious about this, then now is the time to book a call with me. And again, it's going to be first come, first serve. So the first ones to book the call will then be able to see a sample contract and go from there to see if they would want to move forward with me. So if you are interested, please email me at kaylee@slateandkey.com and we will jump on a call and go from there, talk with you about your specific situation and see if I can help. But thank you for being on the webinar today. I hope you found a lot of good information about Portugal and why Portugal is an amazing place to live and why you should consider it this year. And I'll be doing these again. So just stay tuned. Make sure you sign up on my website for future webinars. But again, if you are ready to go, then it is time to jump on a call with me. So email me at kaylee@slateandkey.com and I will talk with you soon. Bye.